30 minutes to be a little bit more interactive. And so I have moved kind of some of my more interactive pieces to the end to kind of move into that place, but we will talk at the end and just give some time and space to reflect on your own red flags and trauma exposure responses, and then taking some time to, jot down and think about or put on your calendar some things for a stress resistance and self-care plan. So first, I come at the way I educate on this from a very specific book called Trauma Stewardship. I don't know if some of you have read it. I read it many years ago when I first started in this field, and then I read it again just a couple years ago. And so I talk from the perspective, a lot of the things that are shared in that book. Especially if things resonate with you and you want to go deeper, I highly recommend this book. But one of the things that the author, Laura Vandernoot Lipsky, says in the beginning of the book that really stuck out to me as someone who is very much educationally trained as a social worker, that sometimes we go into this work armed with a burning passion and a tremendous commitment, but few other internal resources. So going into it with maybe the things that we need to do the work and the passion to want to do the work. But when we don't have those other internal resources, it's hard for us to keep that tremendous commitment when we're not taking care of ourselves. And so my main goal for today is for us all to assess and improve those internal resources. So first, I'm just going to fly through some definitions. So vicarious trauma is a process of change resulting from empathetic engagement with trauma survivors. And so that's just something that we're all kind of going to experience at times, because it is just when we are showing up for our clients, we're going to experience those things. And then secondary traumatic stress is both a physical and emotional stress response to working with survivors. And these also relate to being a caregiver. I use a lot of language as working with trauma survivors because that's what I do in my work. And since you have found me through this presentation through ICASHT, I assume that many of you do similar work, but a lot of these things, and she talks about in the book, relate to caregivers, relate to people doing climate crisis work. It's not just about working specifically with individuals who have experienced trauma, but that's kind of the lens that I'm coming from. But the main thing is like vicarious trauma is cumulative over time. So that's when it kind of builds up when you're not doing those things to take care of yourself and you're not dealing with the things that might be impacting you more significantly in the moment. And secondary traumatic stress can sometimes come on more suddenly and may mirror the symptoms of the client. And so instead of that slow buildup, this could be if you are working with a client who has just recently gone through something, their trauma is very acute, like it has just happened recently, or if you're going to the scene of where something happened to the client, the secondary traumatic stress may come on a lot more suddenly and have a more bigger sudden reaction. Compassion fatigue is an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those you are helping. So this is just, exactly what the words say. When you've been doing this work for a long time and you have those feelings of fatigue. And then burnout is affecting all areas of your life and is brought on by the prolonged or repeated stress that you may experience in your work. And this burnout is when it kind of gets to that point of overwhelm, where it's not just about kind of managing symptoms, but sometimes you have to take a step away from the stress because it has impacted so many parts of your life. And so another related term that is what is used in the book and is what we're going to kind of talk about today is a trauma exposure response. And this is just the fact that we are affected by the suffering of others, which is true for us and our work and is true for most people as humans. And so the trauma exposure response, we're going to talk about what that looks like, but it just kind of goes into more details of the ways that your exposure to the trauma and the stress of your work shows up in your life. And so with all of these definitions, the main differences are how and when the impact starts to show up and to what degree. So all of these different definitions are about that you are taking on, you're being a compassionate witness to the suffering of others, and that's going to have an impact on you. And I think that's a big thing that's important just to accept, is that no one is ever strong enough or educated enough or prepared enough to just not be affected by witnessing and holding space for the suffering of others. And so that's why these conversations that we're having today are so important, because we're all going to be impacted by these things. And so what's the best way to take care of ourselves when we know that these things will be true for us at some point in our lives and careers? These are just some risk factors to keep in mind. This is not saying that if you have experienced personal trauma that you shouldn't do this work. Those who have lived experience are oftentimes the most equipped to support survivors going through similar experiences, but it's just always something, of course, to keep in mind that vicarious trauma and trauma exposure response can impact you more aggressively if you have your own history of similar trauma. But there are other things that increase the risk of these as well. Just negative personal circumstances in general. I think we all kind of know that if things in our personal lives are going well, it's going to be easier for us to handle the day-to-day stress of the work that we do. But if you are experiencing things in your own personal life, that's going to impact, it's all going to impact each other. It's going to be maybe a little harder for you to show up the way that you want to at work. And sometimes work is going to make it harder for you to show up the way you want to in your life. Low levels of social support. So whether this is just in your own social circle, or that you're not getting the support that you need from your agency or organization or wherever you work. If you are lacking the support that you need, it's going to be harder for you to take care of yourself. And so you may see an increase in those responses to the trauma exposure. And so, like I already said, this is not disqualifying anyone from doing the work. These are just other things on top of the kind of trauma exposure response things that we're going to talk about to kind of keep in mind as you're assessing yourself today as we have this conversation, but also just throughout, if when you're noticing, oh, hey, I'm feeling more irritable, or I'm feeling this way or that way, recognizing like, well, maybe I'm having these responses, but I'm also kind of having this other stuff going on in my life that I should probably work on increasing as well to help kind of overall. So in the book, she talks about 16 signs of trauma exposure response. And so I'm not going to talk in detail about all 16 of them, but I did put them all on the slides. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about ones that I feel like I see commonly experienced in others who are doing this work. Feeling helpless and hopeless. So feeling personally responsible for a client's situation and feeling like you can't, we can't be everything to everyone. And so sometimes that can set into being kind of a feeling of helplessness, but also with that feeling of hopeless, just getting in that headspace of like, this is long and difficult work that we are doing. We are helping survivors day to day, but like on, hopefully our long-term aspirations for many of us is that we wouldn't have uh, people experiencing sex trafficking and sexual assault and these different things. And so that can feel like a lofty goal, that's going to take a lot of societal ongoing change. And so if we get ourselves in that headspace of only thinking about the fact that we may not ever reach that goal in our lifetimes, we can settle into those feelings of hopelessness, and that's going to impact our ability to show up for our clients in the moment. And so this one and also the next one, of a sense that one can never do enough, I think it's really important for us to kind of take perspective that we are doing the good that we can with the clients that we have in front of us, and keeping our focus on that. Um, and even when it comes to like prevention and policy change and all those things, focusing on the things that we can change and not focusing on kind of the overarching, like looming um, trauma that is there, can help us sometimes not get into these feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. And not that we don't want to be wanting that to be our goal. But sometimes if we get too focused on that, then we can lose sight of the good that we're doing day to day with the clients that we are working with. So yeah, I already touched a little bit on a sense of that one can never do enough, and just functioning from a place of tremendous urgency. So kind of what I'm already talking about, of just this urgency about the bigger goals, rather than coming from a place of how do we retain our own health for longevity. And so if we are burning ourselves out, and we're all bringing really good things to the movements that we're involved in, but if we are just focusing on that sense of never being able to do enough, and we let that get us burnt out, then that's, another good person in the field that is, no longer able to do that work, because we do have to do what we can to take care of ourselves. And so, this whole conversation is about like, how can we take care of ourselves better in the day to day, so that we are able to be in this work for the long haul. Um, Hypervigilance, so just that feeling of always being on. So, with clients with trauma responsive hypervigilance, there's that scanning of the environment and always feeling like you are scanning for safety. But hypervigilance also can be that feeling of like always feeling like you have to be like doing something and everything has to be productive. I definitely personally get into that headspace of like, when I do have time to like sit still or rest, I feel like I should be doing something. And that is, that place of hypervigilance of just, there's always more work. There always is more work to be done. And so just that feeling of like always focusing on that and never being able to just turn off and focus on, being grounded and the other things in your life. Jumping down to chronic exhaustion and physical ailments. And so this is not, some days are going to be more tiring than others, and getting home at the end of the day and just, being so excited to crawl in bed and go to sleep. We're all going to have days like that. But the chronic exhaustion and physical ailments are, it's the mind body connection of the more stress we're experiencing, the more our bodies are going to be impacted. So whether that's chronic fatigue or gastrointestinal issues, headaches, um, all of those things are a huge sign of trauma exposure response, is just the ways that it impacts your body. Dissociative moments, so dissociating when it just becomes too much and your brain needs a break, but sometimes that will be when you are maybe you're with a client and your brain just can't hold it all in the moment, and so kind of going to that zoning out place of like being physically present, but mentally not being there. This is another one that is a mirror of, you know, I work with lots of clients who dissociation is a huge protective coping mechanism that their nervous system goes to, and so that happens to us as well. So when whether it's at work, someone's trying to talk to you, or when it's at home and your partner or your kids or a friend is trying to engage with you and your brain you're not there in the moment. And so if you're noticing that happening more and more often, that is another sign of that trauma exposure response. Um, and so the next one is guilt. And so just feeling that can be feeling guilty that, like if you're working, especially working in a shelter, or if you have clients who are living in a shelter, and you are going home at the end of the day, and sometimes you can just get into those feelings of guilt, that you have a better life than your clients, or guilt connected to other things that are already listed as like guilt of not doing enough. But I think this guilt of feeling like you have a better life than your clients can be harmful, because sometimes if we are, trying to hide our own privilege, then that can also create disconnection with our clients. So it's hard for us to be genuine with them if we're just feeling so much guilt that we, are getting stilted in our interactions with them. Not that, we're not, we don't want to like be oversharing with them or anything, but just like getting too stilted and trying to hide some of those things um, can create disconnection with clients. I saw that someone in the chat asked about the book. I do have it listed at the end, but it's called Trauma Stewardship, and the author is Laura Vandernoot Lipsky. Um, Anger and cynicism. So this can be as like innocent, well, I don't know if innocent's the right word, but getting in that space of like making lots of cynical jokes, or different things like that, but also just like like anger, righteous anger, um, justifiable anger at the injustices that we are seeing our clients experience. Having that can lead us to good change. That can be a good motivator for us to do the work that we do. But when it's kind of like settling in and anger is kind of spreading to other areas of our lives, and we kind of feel like our main underlying um, emotion a lot of the time is anger, that can be a pretty good sign that you're experiencing like vicarious trauma, or the compassion fatigue of like not being able to show compassion always because you are so just stuck in the anger of the situation. And so anger is not a bad thing. There's a lot to be angry about with the situations and the things that our clients are experiencing, the things that are going on in the world. There's a lot to be angry about, but just there's a difference between that being a motivator for us and that being something that is leading to some of the, physical ailments, or leading to other experiencing more of the trauma exposure responses, because the anger is kind of becoming the main thing. Inability to empathize or numbing. So just having difficulty really being present and showing empathy to clients when you're working with them, or to other people in your life. A good metaphor kind of for this is that a sponge can only take in so much before it needs to be wrung out. And so if you're taking in and taking in and taking in and witnessing these things and being present for your clients and being present for the other people in your life, but you're not taking time to do things that feed your own soul or help you take care of yourself, then that sponge isn't getting wrung out. And so you're not getting back to that point of being able to carry or witness things for clients, or other people in your life. And so just getting to a place where you're just kind of unable to do that. And so getting numb to the things that are going on around you. So I kind of just talked about some of the, main ones. Any thoughts or questions about the ones I talked about, or ones that I didn't talk about? These are just some other signs of secondary traumatic stress. I think I actually got this list from the binder from when I did the Core 40 training many years ago. Oh, hold on, let's go back. Um, and once again, I've like clicked something and now I can't make the slides go the way I want them to. So someone had asked about number 8, so inability to listen or deliberate avoidance. And so this could be either within your work, or can also be like if you're feeling really overwhelmed with work, just realizing that you're maybe like ignoring personal calls, letting your voicemail or your email stay full and pile up just when you're getting overwhelmed with everything. Just kind of starting to either subconsciously or deliberately avoid personal or professional things, because it just feels like you can't take on anymore. And so instead of being able to maybe like talk to people in your life about that, or your supervisor or whoever, to try to manage it, just getting in a place where you're kind of letting it all pile up. I kind of like in the age of the iPhone, I just imagine like the numbers and the red dots on your phone getting higher and higher and higher, from just not feeling like you have the capacity to take one more call or do one more thing. And so, and yes, this absolutely can be with your personal life, or yes, with clients as well. So it's not just, I think that's just one of the ways that we sometimes like see it first, is like when work gets overwhelming, then we kind of start to like, a lot of these things start to happen in our personal lives where we're like not taking those calls. But yes, it can absolutely happen with clients as well. Even with like specific clients, if you're, especially with secondary traumatic stress, if you're feeling your own trauma responses around a particular client, And so you're noticing, like, I'm not being able to show up for this particular person because I'm being activated by their particular situation, um, then yeah, it can definitely happen with clients as well. Um, and it can be deliberate or subconscious of just like you see that that person is calling you and you're like, oh, I'm doing this, so I'm going to do it later, and then struggling to end up going back to that. All of these responses can happen both in your personal life or in your work life. Um, I think just sometimes we can notice it sooner if we kind of notice the ways that we're taking work home. And so maybe before you start checking out at work, you've become so overwhelmed all day at work that you're kind of checking out and feeling some of these things at home. Um, Especially maybe like with the guilt or with minimizing of when people in your personal life are like bringing their problems and you're like, I can't deal with this because the people that like my clients have real problems, your problem's not real. Even that can be a sign of trauma exposure response. And I think those things are just ways that like noticing the way it's impacting your life outside of work can sometimes help you recognize it uh, sooner. Maybe not for everybody, but for some people, I think you might recognize it sooner because it's like you're having a really long, stressful day at work, then you're going home, um, you're dissociating, you are minimizing things of the, personal lives of other people in your life. Maybe you're feeling some of that guilt, or like with addictions, maybe you're going home and you're not in a full blown addiction yet, but you are drinking or doing things that to kind of numb. And so uh, that is just a way to kind of notice that, like, oh, maybe my work is affecting my personal life. But also, it can happen at work first. And I think that also kind of plays into the risk factors as well. Because if you have a lot of really good support at home, then it might be that like things are going to, but you don't have all the support you need at work, then you might start like doing the um, numbing or the ignoring at work. But then when you get home and you have good support, that is like you're able to really lay the day down. Um, then you may not notice them at home first. Um, so yeah, these are just some other ones. It's kind of repeats, but just some other things that are not like are not all covered. Like intrusive thoughts. We did talk about chronic fatigue and anger, but also poor concentration. I think that can be covered by a lot of things in the trauma exposure response, but sometimes that's just kind of on its own. Poor concentration, struggling with memory. I actually was talking to someone the other day about how I feel like my memory was so much better before I started doing this work. And then now my memory is like even worse from like being pregnant and having a toddler. So that's definitely one of my like first signs that I need a break is when I like cannot keep all the things straight, because it just is even harder for me now than it has been at other times in my life. Um, but yeah, so just another just Emily said in the chat about like printing these out to use as a self check-in. That's kind of why I included this slide as well, is just because it's another list of things, another way for you to kind of check in with your own signs of secondary traumatic stress. And also, secondary traumatic stress, like I said, is the one that can sometimes come on more suddenly. And so I think like the intrusive thoughts, the poor concentration, detachment, maybe fearfulness, even, or hypervigilance, those are things that go along with the secondary traumatic stress because they really can mirror the things that our clients are experiencing, and are things that you might just feel come on really quickly if you have had an experience with a client, or not even with a client, like a work experience or a personal experience that just impacted you. Uh, it was, too much too quickly, and you're experiencing some of the things that uh, you would experience when you're experiencing direct trauma. Um, so as we're talking about self-care, I always like to talk about the stress cycle. I am I kind of clicked through some of the participants, so I know that there are many of you on here that know me, and so you know that I talk about the nervous system all the time. It's my favorite thing to talk about because I just see so much the mind-body connection of how much trauma and stress impacts our nervous system. And so a huge thing, I originally heard of this, and I listed these things in the resources at the end as well. But I originally heard about the stress cycle when um, on Brene Brown's podcast. And she had on Emily and Amelia Nagoski, who wrote the book Burnout. And then later I read the book. And so I have that listed as well. But they talk in that podcast about the stress cycle and completing the stress cycle. And so when we experience stress, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. And when we're in that fight or flight and our body is feeling like we need to run, but we're not actually being chased by something, we need to do something to reset our nervous system. And so these are things to do to help, complete the stress cycle. So like something happens, you're feeling stressed, and then you need to do something to kind of relax and reset your nervous system. And sometimes we need to do this because we have completed the stressful thing. So we finished the grant, or the court hearing is over, or if it's, can be in your personal life too, like you put the kids to bed, or you got, you know, whatever's kind of going on in your life, and the stressor is gone. But sometimes, especially if you've experienced trauma, or if you're experiencing trauma exposure response, your body, your nervous system doesn't just immediately like, oh, the stress is gone, we're good, I'm good. It doesn't always happen that way. And so completing the stress cycle, these are efficient ways to help signal to your nervous system that the stress is done, and we can complete that to kind of try to go back to like our baseline, or like to be able to be in a place to like be safe and social and connected to the people in our life. And so um they talk about all that, and then they also talk about like from the science, the most efficient ways to complete the stress cycle. So the first one is physical activity. And so this is the most efficient, especially if you do something more high intensity. So like going for a run or going for a walk, but like power walking. I sometimes will just like do jumping jacks, just something to get your heart rate up, to kind of move some of that stress out of your body. The next one is deep breathing. So if focusing on your breath, if you have time to stop and focus on your breath and to make your exhale longer than your inhale, so like inhaling to like a count of 4, but exhaling to 6, that is helping to signal to your body a sign of safety. Because if you are literally running from something, you don't have time to slow down your breath. You're breathing the way that you're breathing to get enough respiration to run. And so that is a easy physical way to signal to your body that it's okay to reset, to relax, by just doing any type of deep breathing. But I always remind my clients and others that the longer exhale is a quick way to signal to the body the sign of safety. So having like genuine social interactions, like spending time with people that you care about and care about you, um, can help complete the stress cycle. Laughter has to be like genuine laughter. So I always think this is like a good one if you um, maybe don't like you do go home and don't have like either you live alone or you're a single parent and you're needing something to do kind of after, like at the end of the day, is like watching a show that you like know is genuinely going to make you laugh. Like I have a very particular episode of Parks and Rec that I watch when I want to just really laugh, and for some reason no matter how many times I watch it, it still works. I think I haven't watched it in a while, but just having something or spending time with people, the social interaction can go with the laughter as well, of like spending time with people who you genuinely enjoy being around that are going to lead you to the really good, deep laughter. That is another thing that helps to complete the stress cycle and signal to your nervous system that you can be safe and social. Physical affection, so this is, giving or receiving a hug. They say that 20 seconds is I've read this in like tons of articles and books, but I've never actually, now that I'm saying this, read like the study that says this. But a 20-second hug, that's kind of like well, the amount of time that you need, like the pressure to really release and get those good feeling chemicals going. And last, cry. So just really giving yourself the space to like feel the feelings, and if it is something that is an emotion that makes you want to cry, just giving yourself that space to do that, because that kind of also helps the stress leave the body. I tell that to my clients all the time, especially when they are like apologizing for crying in session, and like, this is great. This is a great way for you to complete the stress cycle, is to release some of that. And then I just threw on here a bunch of different ideas for self-care. And just, I think also keeping in mind with these are the things that also would help complete the stress cycle. And I think self-care, sometimes seems like the things that we do when we're like having a really bad day and we want to feel better. And so, you know, going for a walk out in nature or taking a bath or doing a face mask or all those different things. Those are self-care, but also just like doing the things that help you feel like you, um, and doing the things to like take care of yourself day to day. That's also self-care. So like getting enough quality sleep, drinking enough water, eating enough and to help you feel full and nourished throughout the day. Those are all things also that are self-care. Um, Exercise, I talk a lot about like being mindful of what type of exercise your body needs. Like if you're trying to complete the stress cycle, you might want to do something like a little bit more like running or a high intensity workout, but during other times, self-care. So like an ongoing practice for me is like doing yoga, because that feels more restful for me. But also still feels like I'm exercising, building some muscle. Um, and so and then, of course, exercise can be as simple as taking a walk. And so even if it's just like in the middle of the day to get outside and move your body for 5 minutes, like taking a 5-minute walk on your lunch break, can be hugely helpful, which also kind of, taking a walk during your lunch break leads to some other things on here of like taking a break during the day, eating lunch not at your desk, just giving yourself, even if it's just like 10 or 15 minutes, just like stepping away from what you're working on, to let yourself eat your lunch. Um, and then just, like I said, anything that helps you feel like you. So like whatever hobbies and things help you feel like you, making sure that you're making space in your life for those things. Um, and I probably should move this one to the beginning with the like things that may not seem like self-care but are important, is setting boundaries. So having boundaries with your clients, with your colleagues, in your personal life, having boundaries is a huge way to not get overwhelmed. And that's like a whole other presentation we could talk about, setting boundaries. I spend sessions and sessions and sessions talking with clients about setting boundaries because I don't think it's always something that we were, for some of us, maybe it was modeled to us growing up, but it's not always something that we were explicitly told or taught to do. And so if you didn't have people in your life that modeled that for you, it can be a really hard thing to do, to set boundaries. And so, yeah. So it's just a list of ideas. Um, okay. So I kind of saved the more like interactive stuff for the end. I usually do it throughout, but I know that we kind of want to um, kind of keep the end for some of the more interactive. And so before we kind of move into that, does anyone have any thoughts or questions about the things that we've talked about so far? Someone did ask, and this I will also, um, maybe I'll kind of save this. Someone asked, Kara asked, do you have any ideas for team activities for self-care? I think that will be a great one. I'm definitely willing to, give my ideas, but I think that would be a great one for us to kind of talk about too, if other people have ideas as well. Um, but yeah, any thoughts or questions before we move into kind of some kind of interactive stuff? Okay. So we'll kind of save that question. And so before we move in to interacting, as in talking to each other, first, I just want to give you guys a little bit of time. I'm going to try to go back to the slides. Um, if it will let me do that, click through easily. But I just want to give you guys a few minutes to look back at the list of the trauma exposure response. Um, and I want you to take a few minutes to look back over those symptoms and the signs of secondary traumatic stress and think back over the last 30 days and how many, if any, of these you have experienced. And then once you've identified those, just taking a few minutes to think about to what degree you feel like you're experiencing them. So let's see. Oh yeah, this presentation, I don't have like very many slides in this, so that was pretty easy. So yeah, just taking a few minutes to, jot it down if you want to, or just to think about it, but just kind of looking through the list and thinking about if you have experienced any of these currently or in the last 30 days and to what degree. So the next I want to just take a moment, and this one I do like to hear from other people. Um, just thinking back over the last 30 days and identifying maybe some of your personal red flags. So things that aren't on the list, but are things that you notice in yourself when you're moving towards stress or overwhelm. So like for me, I drink way too much coffee when I'm feeling more stressed, which is like probably super counterintuitive for my anxiety level. But for some reason, I guess subconsciously, I think it's gonna like make me more productive. But I just am like, I need more coffee. So if you feel comfortable sharing some of those red flags, um, you can put them in the chat and I will read some of them, or I think also you can unmute and share as well. I don't think we're all, I don't think we're on like the webinar status where everybody's muted. So people are sharing irritability. Yeah, big one. Sleeping issues, checking email and messages when off work. Uh, Karen said she's like me, too much coffee as well. And then uh, also like irritability, getting annoyed with others more easily, finding it hard to focus, like feeling overwhelmed so can't complete tasks, sleeping issues. I play with my hair more when I'm stressed. See, those are the like specific things that sometimes that like people experience, but maybe not everybody does. Um, and lack of empathy, exhaustion, irritability. Mhm. Yep, nearly all of the secondary signs. Avoidance of going to bed on time. Yes. Oh, what do they call that? Like revenge. Uh, Something about revenge of your time. I do the same thing. I do that more because I'm a parent than because of work stress. But it's like when I should be going to bed, I'm like, oh, but it's quiet and I can actually like read or do something and then staying up way too late. Okay, Mark, you might have to unmute yourself and tell us what misophonia sensations are.
Right. Um, like it's the irritability of sounds. And so like it's that somebody chewing gum or that
Mm,
cereal or that slurping, like normally I'm fine, but all of a sudden like irritability, like noises,
hmm.
those noises just become so overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that's why I love to ask this question because I always learn new things that completely make sense about just like a very specific irritability, but things that I wouldn't always think of. Um, oh yeah, Whitney shared, I lost my sense of not currently, not in her current position, but in previous role, lost my sense of humor and felt like it was on me to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. So yeah. Hmm. Feeling like I can't do enough, and then I might feel a sense of persecution for doing more. Yes, yeah, I didn't go into that one much today, but yeah, that sense of persecution that we get where sometimes like when we don't feel like we have efficacy or control of our life, and then but we feel like we need to like keep doing more, but then we don't set boundaries when we could, but then we feel that sense of persecution if we do more. um yeah, that can be huge, feeling like we're if we don't do it, no one's going to do it, so we have to do it, and then feeling, like we've been harmed in some way, which sometimes that happens. Like the sense of persecution is a really hard one because sometimes we don't have the support that we need in the work that we're doing. Also, of course, like with many of these things, there is really true persecution and oppression in our world and in this field. And so that can be a really hard one. Um, Oh yeah, unhealthy diet, eating out all the time. I think that's a really good one of like, because the eating out, one, maybe we don't eat things that make us feel good when we eat out, but also just that feeling like you don't have anything left in your tank at the end of the day to make a meal. Um, that's, yeah, that's a huge one. And then Emily said, excessive planning, organizing, detailing out my day to make everything happen. So, yeah, just that feeling of like we have to be the one to do it and get it done. And so, becoming very uh, micromanaging our own lives to feel that we're doing enough. Thanks, everyone, for sharing. Those are some really good ones. Good ones feels like a bad thing to say because they're not good, but it's always interesting to learn about other things. When overwhelmed, avoidance of tasks that seem insurmountable, and then shift and refocus on tasks that can be accomplished. Sometimes that can be the way to do it, though. Sometimes doing the small things can give you that momentum, but then other times we can just keep putting things off. All right. So now, so when I do this more for people to just like do their own plan, I just kind of give space to, I like people to think of it as like a stress resistance plan, not really a self-care plan. And so things that you can do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually to help protect yourself against burnout. So just like having a plan of these are the things that I need to do to take care of myself. But then it is also important to have a self-care plan. So those are the things on like the days that are particularly stressful or you feel that sudden overwhelm. These are the things that you're going to do on that day to kind of help reset yourself more quickly. So those might be some of the stress cycle things, um, things that you can do on that day or within that week to give yourself kind of a reset. So I will kind of click back to my slides, but I just want you to kind of be thinking about those things, but also sharing. Um, and so let's take a few minutes to do that, and then we will jump into this question of ideas. I'm trying to scroll back. I shouldn't try to scroll back though, because then if other people type, it'll go back to the bottom. But so let's just take a few minutes to think about and share about personally the things that you do for stress resistance and self-care. And then next, we'll talk about Kara's great question of ideas for team activities for self-care. So I kind of mentioned, like, I'll get the ball rolling. I kind of mentioned as I was presenting, like a big thing for me is trying to during the week do a couple yoga classes. I do try to walk every day, once in the morning, and then usually with my family in the evening. Um, and those are kind of my weekly, daily things. Listening to music and going on walks, noticing nature when I go for walks. Yeah, that one's good. That helps you be more mindful when you're on your walk instead of just walking, but maybe thinking about work or thinking about uh, things at home. So, being more mindful, noticing the things when you're out on your walk. Um, Daily quiet time. So if you do that kind of thing or meditating, that can be a really good grounding part of your day every day. Another one, multiple ones for walking, um, getting in nature, game night with friends and family, walking outside and listening to an audiobook. Oh, yep, this is a great one from Nicole. Build in breaks on the work calendar. So putting it on your calendar, putting it in your phone, to like ding to remind you, to give you that alert that like, hey, time to take a break. Um, Gratitude walks, thinking about all of the things I am grateful for and the many blessings around me. Yeah, that one's really good. Gratitude can be like a huge thing for this, of like especially combating some of the guilt and things like that, is like making sure that you are remembering the things that are important and having gratitude for the people and things in your life at work and at home. Cuddling with my dog who needs nothing from me while I'm reading. Perfect. Yes. Oh, here's some good specific work ones. Don't have my work email on my personal phone, so I don't see notifications. That one's great. Okay, so jumping back to this question, because I do want to leave some time to talk about this, and if anybody else has other things or questions they want to talk about. So, any ideas for team activities for self-care? And Karen shared, my director is considering reaching out to our local massage therapy school and asking the students to come out a couple times a month with a chair, so they are getting their experience and we can get some back massages in the office. And then also take daily walks and invite my coworkers for a time to unplug, even if it's just 20 minutes. I think those are both great. I think that, yeah, I think just spending time together, not talking about working, which Amanda just said, a night out with colleagues with no work talk, or even just like going to lunch together. So maybe not, like something that is like during the workday, but I think that can be huge. I think that's a good one that's like, yeah, sometimes there can be uh Christmas parties and celebrations, but like setting the precedent of like everybody takes a lunch break and we're not going to work during this hour and we're going to spend time together. Like in one of my first jobs in this field, working in a shelter, um, we most of us went to lunch together like at least once a week, sometimes more, sometimes too much from a wallet. But that was like a huge thing that I felt like was really um a great part of that job, was that someone else was saying, "Hey, we're leaving to go to lunch." And so I was getting pulled out of the shelter to take that time in the middle of the day, um, for myself, and making sure, that made sure I was eating and I was like probably drinking water at lunch and I was having that social interaction because I was with my coworkers. And so I think that is just a great way of, not just like, yeah, having those special things like the people coming to do the massage once a month, having things that you're doing monthly and quarterly, but also just those ways throughout the week that you, maybe as the boss or the leader, are setting that precedent of like, hey, I'm leaving to eat lunch, or I'm going into the conference room to eat my lunch. Like, who wants to come hang out with me? And maybe having, um, you know, we all love get to know you questions, but having things like that, or like activities that you're doing so that you're just spending time getting to know each other and kind of not doing work. Um so yeah, Amanda had said a night out with colleagues with no work talk. John's shared some team activities, barbecues, staff retreats, escape rooms, creating space for letting colleagues know that what we appreciate about them. Oh, several staff will work outside on good weather days. That's a great idea. Just getting, if you can get outside during the workday, that can be huge as well. But yeah, I want to comment on what Amanda said, because I think that that is also huge. Like, we all can sometimes get our heads down, get in our own work, and we don't always like show and tell other people the things that we appreciate about them. And I think that can be huge in helping to fight um, some of the trauma exposure response of like it's harder to get into that mindset of like feeling like you're not doing enough and feeling helpless and hopeless when like the other people that you're working with are telling you the things that they appreciate about you. When you as a staff are celebrating even the small wins, I think all of those things are kind of maybe not the like fun self-care things, but I think all of that kind of stuff is like building in that stress resistance, and it is self-care to provide those things and share those things with each other. Whitney shared we got a grant that allowed us to do some investment in team care, and we've partnered with Thought Kitchen to do some really wonderful sessions with them every couple months. Yeah, just doing those specific things are really great as well. So what other thoughts or questions do people have? I think not so well, the questions can be for me, but not so much just for me, but just like kind of continuing with like the interactive piece of like what are other questions or thoughts that people want to share. I guess another before maybe while people are thinking, I also like another self-care thing could be I have not been part of this, but I know of agencies that have read trauma stewardship together. So like doing like a staff book club and picking things like that that are maybe not like directly work related, but are more about like how to care for yourself. Um, and so that could be a great thing as well, would be doing, some type of like staff book club and reading trauma stewardship or burnout or other things. Oh, yeah, great. So Tamika shared we read books 2 to 3 times a year as leadership team. Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. How might you deal with situations when organizations or higher ups in an organization contribute to secondary trauma or struggle at times in managing this in their employees? That's a great question that I'm sure many of us have struggled with. Um, I think a huge thing from of things that you can do personally, um, like for yourself, as I just think going back to like the setting boundaries, I would love for, and I hope other people will share as well about their experiences. But I think that's been a huge thing for me in jobs that I've had, is setting those boundaries and then trying to, um, also just like not letting it go of continuing to talk to those people, trying to get them educated on things like this. So like coming to presentations like this, I know that we don't always have control and they're not always going to listen. And so I think that's where like the setting the boundaries can help show them like tangibly of like, well, so that I'm not experiencing secondary stress. This is what these are my boundaries and I'm going to stick to them. Um, and just doing your best to do that. Um, But that's a really hard one. What are other people's thoughts or experiences with that? Yeah, I think that just kind of shows that this is probably something that many of us have struggled with and are struggling with, um, is when the people at the top, for either their own reasons or for because they maybe don't understand all of the complexities of it, um, or depending on the type of organization or the work that you do, like the politics, the funding. Um, yeah, that's just a huge thing I think that impacts, um and so yeah, Tamika shared speak with your leadership, and so that's what, yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think that I think I've been in situations before where I, had to do that and I had to set boundaries. And um, in one of those situations, I was uh, in a place where I was able to leave that job. And I know that that comes from a place of privilege that I was able to do that, and not everyone can do that. And so I think it's just continuing to speak to your leadership, advocating for yourself, advocating for your coworkers, and then doing those things throughout the day to set boundaries and to um, care for yourself. Um, because, yeah, there's like not really a great answer to that question, because it's a really, really hard thing. And especially when what is going on at the top level is, also impacting maybe the services that your clients are getting. um, that can be really hard as well. And I think kind of like documenting some of that and like being able to show the leadership, like, these are the way it's impacting me, but also in turn, these are other ways that these are ways that we could be serving our clients better if our own like vicarious trauma and secondary traumatic stress was being handled better, then like our agency as a whole could be doing this, um could be serving, like, doing our mission better. Yeah, and Nicole shared it's tough when leadership think they are working for their employees, but in reality they are making difficult situations worse. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's just yeah, I don't even know what else to say, because it's a hard thing that is reality for many people, that we are, doing the best we can and want to do the work well. Um, and sometimes it's hard to do that because of the way that decisions are being made. And then Nicole, a different Nicole, I probably should be reading people's full names, because there are probably a lot of people in here with the same first name, and I've only been reading first names. Um, Nicole Gutierrez shared, I think we also have to recognize when our leadership is made up of managers, not leaders. And so we have to learn to speak that language sometimes. Mhm. Yeah, I think like learning to speak their language, and then also like trying to provide them with education on the realities of, seeing if you can get them to engage, and like that going both ways of like, when you're presenting something to them, spending a little bit of time putting it into like management language, but then also like specifically with what we're talking about today is like seeing, uh, trying to get them to, read the trauma stewardship book or go to a presentation like this and have them also learn a little bit more about what the staff and the clients are experiencing. And this is something that I sometimes speak about in these presentations, but I didn't today, but now I kind of wish I had, but just that idea of self-compassion. And so especially in these kind of situations is to kind of help let go of maybe some of the anger and some of the cynicism. It's just like reminding yourself that like this is hard. Like no one is saying that it's not, and I wish I had a better answer, but I don't. But just letting yourself not wallow in it, but like sit in like this is hard. This is a really hard place to be in. This situation is hard. Um, it's difficult that I don't have the support that I need. It's it sucks that this is like impacting my clients and just kind of giving that space to um, not bury yourself in the negative emotions, but not try to just go at it from a point of like anger, but also just like respecting your own emotions and feelings of like, this is a really hard situation that I'm in. And then what are the things I can do to take care of myself? Like what is in my control?
As we come to the end of our time, I want to give a moment to see if anyone has any last questions or thoughts for Whitney. And then we want to thank her deeply for having a really important and hard conversation with us today, because you said it so beautifully that this is such hard work, and it does ask us to carry a lot of weight too. And so thank you for helping us really reflect on the weight of that and how as individuals to carry that, and also as leadership in organizations, how do we design our organizations in a way that supports the folks who are trying to carry it too. So any last thoughts or questions for Whitney this morning? Any last words of wisdom from you, Whitney?
I don't think so. I think just thanks so much for being here. Taking time out of your morning to do this is self-care. And so just having a moment of gratitude for yourself for taking the time to think about this and give yourself that space. And so, yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Well, and thank you many times over for your generosity with all of us, not just this morning, but also Core 40 and all of the ways that you lead this conversation with us, because it is a conversation we need to have all the time. And so thank you for always reflecting that back to us, and for doing so again today.
Of course. Thanks.
Okay, well, we will wrap up this morning's Coffee with the Coalition, and I will remind everyone that we do have another coming in July, and all of the information is in the chat if you want to access the information on our website. But again, that date will be July 18th at 10 o'clock, and we hope to see everyone there. Thank you, Whitney.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.